excited to have our panel here tonight to discuss lifelong learning in breast imaging. So, we all have been trained as a resident and a fellow. Now we are all attendings, but new technology has been coming up every year. So, not just you have to learn as a resident and fellow, as a new attending, you and also senior attending, we all have to keep up with our game and continue to learn. So today our topic will basically cover three aspects. First, we'd like to share some of our expectations for the residents, and then we'd like to share what we think will be the essential skills you need to succeed as a fellow. Finally, we'll discuss some resources we think are available for everyone as attending to continue learn and improve our skills. So first, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves. I'll start with Matt.
Hey everyone, Matt Miller. I am a breast imaging radiologist at Allegheny Health Network in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I am currently the Associate Residency Program Director as well. So very interested in education, and it's one of my passions. So excited to be here again today.
All right, I'll go next. Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Pricer. I am a breast imager in Iowa. I am transitioning into a new role at Northeast Iowa Mercy One Health System, where I'll be Director of Breast Imaging. I've been in private practice for my entire career, so I'm a little bit removed from the training of residents, but I can definitely speak to the lifelong learning component of that and how you do that when you're not really in academia anymore.
That's great. We like to have our panelists from both academics and private
Absolutely.
practice to provide both perspectives. My name is Jill Zhang. I just finished my fellowship and right now is a new breast imaging attending at the Jefferson Einstein Health. So today we will, start by discussing the important concepts about lifelong learning. First, I'd like to ask our panelists. So, what are your expectations for the residents, or when you were a resident, what do you think make you stand out on your breast imaging rotation?
Sure. Yeah. I can go first, Rachel. So when the residents come on the breast rotation. It's a little bit different than any other rotation that they've been on. And for us in Pittsburgh at AHN, usually, unless they request it, usually the residents don't start until their second year. So they've had a full year of diagnostic radiology training in addition to their internship. So they're typically PGY 3, so third year residents. And so when they come on breast imaging, they've had a few lectures, but they haven't had a chance to actually rotate through until their second year. As a resident. So when they come on, we don't really expect them to really know how to do any procedures. They come in and, I expect that they have a baseline knowledge of the BIRADs. I expect that they have a baseline knowledge of, bread and butter mammography, what views we get, what's a screening mammogram versus a diagnostic mammogram, what modalities we use, ultrasound, mammogram, MRI. But beyond that, it takes a long time to get good at reading mammograms. And to this day, everyone has misses on their mammograms. We don't like to talk about it, but it's true. So, I'm not expecting a first year resident to be an expert breast imager by any means. I tell them when they come in their first day and I'm working with them that, pick up a few screening mammograms, get used to evaluating the density, get used to looking at all the quadrants, all the views, and take a crack at it. And then when they go home at night, I tell every first year resident to take home the BIRADS manual for a couple of days because we have it in every breast center that we have. And I say, bring it back, but take it home and skim through it. I don't expect them to read it front to cover or front to back because it's a big book, but at least look at the pictures and get used to, using that terminology. So I think that's the baseline expectations for a resident coming on breast imaging, for me at least.
Well, obviously I'm not seeing residents on a daily basis, but I remember, acting as an attending over them at the end of my fellowship and also just as a resident myself. I would encourage people to definitely spend time with the BIRADS manual. I had the kind of interesting thing of I did a fellowship before my breast imaging fellowship, and that's when the BIRADS changed from BIRADS 4 to 5. So when I showed up on for my first day of breast imaging fellowship, everything I learned in residency wasn't quite the same. And that's what I did. I went back to the BioReds manual and just spent some time and got an update. So any time spent reading the BioReds manual or just familiarizing yourself with how it works is time well spent. And I think just asking questions. Breast imaging is hard. Even when you've been doing it for a long time, it's hard. And if you don't know why somebody thinks that calcifications are suspicious versus, no, it's no big deal, ask. And there's really no wrong answer. There's really no stupid question. Just be brave enough to ask a question if you don't get it, because sometimes that will make your attending kind of take a step back and say, oh, well, why did I think that? And really go through it with you. And I think that's one of the keys to success, is to, not just kind of go through the motions, but to really get in there. The other thing is, take an interest in patients. If you see something on a screen and it's given the BioRed 0, try to find it when it comes in and see how it gets worked up. Or work backwards. If you have an breast MRI that you're looking at, go back and look at, what started it all. And that's a good way to kind of learn about hopping between modalities, because that's a lot of what we do as breast imagers is, does this thing I see on ultrasound correspond to what I saw on mammogram or MRI? The only way you get good at that is by practicing it.
Yeah, so also I'd like to welcome our new panelist. Lisa, do you mind to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Sorry for the late introduction, but I'm Elisa Sumpkin. I'm a breast imaging radiologist at Allegheny Health Network. I work with Dr. Miller over here, so we are colleagues, and yeah, that's pretty much about it. I live here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I also want to actually thank Lisa for filling the last minute. We have other panelists had emergencies, so thank you so much for
Yeah,
Thanks, Elisa.
Sure.
So, we were just discussing, what would be your expectations for a resident coming on breast imaging rotation, and what do you think are the skills they need to be successful on that rotation?
Yeah, I mean, we see such a variety, honestly.
That's the truth.
You can tell, of course, the ones that are really interested and the ones that aren't, because it's such a unique specialty, really a unique subset of radiology. So I get it, like you were talking about going in, take interest in the patient, which is such a good point, because I think they're so used to not having that part of their rotation. So I think, even just telling them to do it is something, if they don't understand, they don't know that that's something that they can do on this rotation. So what I always try to tell them, I don't really expect much coming in. I kind of just assume I'm starting from a blank slate and then kind of work my way forward. And as long as they're willing to learn and listen, that's great. One of the things I love to do with them is tell them, like, if they're starting from the very beginning, I want them to go in with the tech and, for a to see a mammogram first. And then I want them to go into the ultrasound room and watch them ultrasound, whatever the finding may be. And then after the tech finds it, I want them to do it. And then after that, I want it flip-flopped. I want them to go in first, and the tech's there the whole time, but they scan first and then the tech scans. So there's definitely a different, because I'm just looking back and remembering how awkward the ultrasound probe used to feel. And it's just like, you don't really know what you're looking for. And even just like the sweeping motion is weird, and everything feels awkward about it. So I think just getting them hands-on, and because, we do so much hands-on ultrasound ourselves, which is also unique too. Other people aren't doing that kind of stuff. So you have to get really good at it. So I try to push them to get in the room, meet the patient, get their hands dirty a little bit. And I think it just makes them, it'll help no matter what they end up doing. So that's kind of the way I go about things. And then, there's different studying that they can do. And I'm actually doing a project with a medical student right now about, how we can get them and medical students more involved in procedure simulations. So actually yesterday I was practicing with one of our medical students from Drexel, and she brought in spam, and we were using spam, which is a new one for me. I just say I'm not really fond of the smell, and it made the whole room, the ultrasound room, really smell bad. But she's doing a project on it. We use, she was telling me about different things that you can do. So I think, just like that sort of idea, hands on, just getting it as involved in you as you can is makes it fun too, and you're going to learn faster. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's all great points, everybody. And I feel like, just to take an interest in the patients, be hands-on, and also, as we all said, we don't expect much. There are some residents coming in already read certain basic concepts. That's already make them stand out a little bit, actually. And if you work hard, show interest in your rotation, it definitely motivate us, make us more like to teach you more. And also, I feel like just to know how the technologists do the day-to-day activity, how the breast is compressed, is very helpful to kind of like have a conceptual um, uh, framework in your head. So, I mean, reading screening is one of the basics we'd like them to do. But for people who really interested in breast imaging, I want them to know, like, breast imaging is way beyond just the reading screenings, which lots of general radiologists actually can do as well. Um, so
I
that's,
remember. I'm sorry,
yeah.
Jill, not to interrupt you, but I always go back to a story that I remember when I was a resident. I was on my IR month, and at WVU we had like an N of 1 for a time where there was only one interventional radiologist, and it was basically you were the resident and he was the attending, and that you ran the whole service at a huge hospital, and so you got to know each other pretty well that month, and it was getting to the end of so I was a senior resident, and he was trying to kind of nudge me into doing IR and like joining him a little bit. And I was like, nah, I finally, I was like, I'm doing breast. And he stopped. He was like, you know what? He goes, I will forever be grateful for my breast rotations, because that's what taught me how to be good at procedures, to be honest with you. He said, where I trained, he said, I didn't get much hands-on with IR. He said, my first exposure to doing procedures was on mammo. He said, and I chose to do IR just because I liked IR. He's like, but doing the procedures on mammo was really what got me interested in, actually getting good at doing procedures. And he said, I took extra mammo rotations towards the end of residency for electives, just because I knew that I could spend a lot of time doing biopsies and put my hand on an ultrasound probe, and it's served me well as an interventional radiologist. So I tell every person that rotates through mammo that is going into IR, I tell them that story, saying, don't blow this off. This isn't a mammo vacation. There's a lot to be learned from, even if you're not going to be doing mammo for the rest of your life, there are skills that you can learn on your mammo rotation as a resident.
Yeah, and also I think mammo is actually pretty heavily tested on the board. It's not like less tested than neuro or body. So it's equally important. I want to see what your advice to the residents about how to prepare for the board to pass the mammo session. Or how did you study your board back in those days for the breast imaging part?
That's a good question. I had there was a so the boards have obviously evolved over time. So we had some attendings come in, and they give you lectures on how to take boards, and the ones who had taken the old boards would always do these old board style sort of open-ended questions, but I just feel like are completely irrelevant to how boards are taken. I mean, it's good information, and it's good to actually be put on the spot, I think, because it's somewhat like having a consult in real life, but it's not the same as boards. So I think making sure that you do regular multiple choice questions, which I don't think is so much of a problem now, is probably back when earlier on when they sort of shifted it, and they've probably, I'm sure, come out with a lot more resources. But there was the one source that was, I think it's called a core review series. And they came out with subjects for everything. They didn't have everything at the time that I took it, but I thought that was really good. And then for my certifying exam too, think it was they had CME on, I think it was on
Board
through
vitals.
Board Vitals I did, and then there was I think it was through ACR had someone had recommended it to me, like CME in breast, that you could do multiple choice questions. Am I making this up, or has anyone else done this before?
I think there are yeah.
Okay, because I remember that being, I feel like it was just forever ago. It wasn't that long ago, but those were really good too. They were in-depth questions. And then I did Kevlar. I felt like it wasn't that helpful, those questions, but I found the core review series to be really good. I don't know if anybody else knows of that one and liked it,
Yeah, I
or
use it.
knew anyone who liked
Are you
it.
talking about the case review series?
Yeah, the case reviews. No, not
Case
the
review
one that with
series.
the pictures and then you just like, that's like the old school one that has the pictures and you
Yeah.
have to make a diagnosis and then turn the page. This one was just like a ton of multiple choice questions
Yep.
with a lot of, I can't remember the name. So it's probably that one.
Yeah, no, I use that one. I thought it was good. People frown, people have their own opinions about it, but I use Crack the Core for all of my board studying.
Oh, yeah.
Prometheus Lionheart, that was kind of my baseline. And I kind of, as APD, I talk to the residents, and some of them still use it, some of them don't. And the ones who don't have all passed the boards the last 2 years, at least at AHN. So for board prep, everyone's different. I think there's always room for doing multiple choice questions, getting good at doing multiple choice questions. There's not really a resource out there that really mimics the board styles quite like, when we took step 1 and step 2, like you could like do a QBank that like really had like literally the same style of questions down to the computer program. It doesn't really exist for the ABR. So there's content questions out there, the RAD primer and the Kevlar and board vitals, and there's one called Face the Core too that I thought was pretty decent. But it's always changing.
So I'm one of those old dinosaurs that took the old board
exam. Come on. You're at the tail end.
I really am. I did the orals and everything. So I can't speak to taking the core. But what I can say that was really helpful for me, I've never really been a group studier, but I was a group studier in residency. And I think that would lend itself really well to studying for the core from what I know of it, and younger people I know who have taken it, because it keeps you honest and it keeps you engaged. And, even when we were doing like our written portion, we had a great group of residents and we studied together and we ran questions together. And it's really easy when you're going through multiple choice questions, just be like, oh yeah, I know that, even if you don't really know that. But if somebody else is running them and you guys are all doing them together, you really come up against what you don't know a little bit harder. So I would encourage people to try to find a study buddy in your residency.
That's a great point.
Yeah. That's actually very helpful. When I studied my board, especially for the physics, I actually had a study buddy, so we call each other every day just for half an hour, and we read the physics book together. Because if we read on our own,
story time with Jill. I love it.
Cannot cover as much, for physics, like for half an hour. So we read together over the phone, and so if we have questions, we just ask each other. I think that's much more efficient going through physics that way than try to like study on your own. I think, physics also a very important part for breast imaging as well. I did all the question banks you guys mentioned when I was studied for the board, and including the core review series, those questions. And I feel like for me, I like to read something, like I read the core radiology, that red book, to have a general framework.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit outdated, but I think they have a new version coming up or already came up. And Crack the Core, I read that one. I feel like that has lots of important facts, but wasn't like as organized as I wanted to be. And then I do all the questions. So that's how I did it. And I feel like lectures are helpful too. Because if your institution has board review courses, definitely go. And I also went to Duke for the both review courses, and I think those are great resources, because for me, I feel like I learned so much more in that 40 minutes or an hour than I could learn myself in that time frame. So I think those are Great. I hope everyone passed their memo session. As I said, it's very important. And going to our rotation, just know how to do day-to-day breast imaging, how to think the next step questions. What's your next step? Those are all your day-to-day breast imaging rotation stuff. If you work hard on your breast imaging rotation, the board become easier. Because we do care how you manage the patient, and the board care about it too. So
I'll go off on a little tangent here
Uh-huh.
real quick and tell a story. When I guess Elisa and Joe, you guys weren't. Well, Joe, you didn't take the boards the same year as me, but Elisa, you must not have been in the cohort that had a computer glitch. So when I was up in,
no, I was in
yeah,
the
did you
other
hear about
one.
that though?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, I was part of that cohort. So I take the ABR core exam, and I go in, and all the computers in the Chicago computer lab had the blue screen of death. And you want to talk about like the exact opposite of what I was expecting for that day. It was crazy. Like people were just like standing around joking. I'm like, wait a minute, like I'm trying to like remember facts like that. Anyway, they fixed the computers, but apparently they dropped the mammo section on accident. And so I didn't get any mammo the time that I took the core exam. And so we all had to and it was everyone in my cohort, which was everyone at WVU. So there was 5 other residents who we had to remediate mammo on our own, just the mammo section. So there was an hour. We had an hour to take, I think 30 some questions or something. I forget how many questions it was. But it was artificial, right? And they were easy. So I mean, like we knew that it was coming like a month or 2 in advance. So I just crammed mammo again, and so I nailed. But I was already going into mammo, so obviously I'm still prepared going up to the board, but it was my mammo experience on the core exam was completely different than anybody else's. Is what I was trying to say.
I'm so jealous that people get to take it virtually now. It seems like less stress.
Absolutely.
I mean, just being in that environment was very stressful.
Yeah.
I actually took my sorry to interrupt, certifying exam from home. But I took my core in Chicago. But honestly, taking from home is nerve-wracking too, because you have to make sure your internet works. I do have a generator from home, but that day I had a really bad storm. My generator did kick in. I don't know how people lose power could be able to handle that stress about not having internet or anything, but
yeah, it's pretty. I mean, no matter what, it's stressful. You just have to get through it.
Yeah, but flying to Chicago definitely is not fun. And then you have to wait for the hotel room to be available, anyway. So, alrighty. So if we actually touched briefly, like if you have a resident already matched into breast imaging, what would you suggest a resident to do during their final senior year to get ready for the fellowship?
I don't want to go first. You guys go first.
Okay, I'll kind of so obviously they should be I think that they should be getting a little bit better at their procedural skills. Like it depends on what institution you're coming from, how much experience you're going to get. Because I think, for example, the residents at our institution have a lot of ability to get, their biopsy skills down. So I would definitely encourage that. There's just so many, and getting some of those major skills down, like your hand-eye coordination and just memorizing even the steps to stereos and to MR biopsies, like that's like, and knowing your BI-RADS, you need to build like the foundation. I think work on a foundation, sort of solidifying that at the end, because then your fellowship is a whole other level of knowledge, that really just takes it up a whole notch, and you're filling in tons of gaps and details of all of this stuff. And doing I did my fellowship at UPMC, and we did the tumor boards there, which were very intense. And you need to be on top of your game then. And so I think really working on building that solid foundation at the end, anything that you can to set the framework for filling in the gaps. Every transition is such a steep learning curve. So you do the best that you can to kind of to prep yourself, and I think ask your attendings what they think that they could do, and I would, say take a little bit of an initiative also. You know, I think that, when you get a diag, you should be thinking on your own, like, okay, what images would I want? What would I be getting, and why would I be getting them? Or why was my attending getting this and I didn't think of that? And sort of a different type of more analytical thinking, basically not just memorizing facts, but you're really trying to figure out, okay, how am I treating this patient? It's not a test anymore. You've passed that at this point in time. So, just going through the framework, okay, how am I going to get this diagnostic figured out? Am I going to do a mammogram? Am I going to do an ultrasound? And then I need to find this myself. Like, I have to be able to scan this, because if my tech doesn't find it, I have to find it. So someone's got to find it, and you have to get good. So, I think that doing all that kind of stuff will really prep you, and then you'll take it to the next level the next year. And then a level after that. Then it slows down a little.
What do you think, Rachel?
I think positioning and understanding positioning and how it can move, especially with people who have exceptionally large breasts, that is challenging. And I've run into people, even in general practice, who've been in practice for years, who still struggle with that. And so if you can, it's the very first thing I learned, or was expected to learn, my very first day of a breast imaging rotation, but it's something that is a challenge, and something it really took years to feel comfortable with in some of these really floppy patients. So work on that positioning and finding it, because when you are in, the person making the call, when you're finally out in practice, you have to find it, no matter what.
Unknown caller.
Sorry. The other thing I would say is just show initiative and get aggressive in finding all of those opportunities. Depending on how the schedule lines up, residents may not get to see everything that is going on in a day. If needle lokes are scheduled, when you're in conference or something, if you have a morning conference, find out about them in advance and try to show up for them. If you know you're going into breast imaging, the more you can see before you show up for your fellowship, the better equipped you're going to be to handle that fellowship.
Those are great recommendations and advice. I'm going to take, so you guys did kind of specific things for people to do. I'm going to take it kind of a different direction and kind of talk more broad strokes. Elisa, you kind of touched on as far as different places have different strengths, and at AHN, we have a lot of procedure, availability for residents because, we have 1 or 0 fellows a year. And then other places, take 3 or 4 fellows and, might not allow the residents to do as many procedures. So there's that, heterogeneity. But at the same time, as a third or fourth year resident, as a senior resident who is matched into breast imaging, you have to figure out what type of job you want. Whether you want to go just be a breast imager and do 100% breast, because those jobs are readily available, but there are also general jobs out there where you do, you might be, a little bit heavy on the breast, but you also read a bunch of other stuff. And so you have to realize that you're signed up for 1 year of intensive breast training, and you want to, don't show up not knowing anything, because then you're going to spend half of your fellowship, catching up. But at the same time, you also want to get good. If you choose the route of, okay, I'm going to be kind of a jack of all trades for whatever practice I sign up for, spend your senior year getting good at reading musculoskeletal MRI, or getting good at, doing neuro, or getting good, have another, there are residents, even in our own department that I advise that, they might be signing up for a fellowship in one avenue, but they're going to do a quote unquote mini fellowship in something else. We have that capability at AHN because we allow them to take 8 or 9 electives their 4th year, which is incredible. I had 2 electives. And I knew I wanted to do mammo 100%. So I used those 2 electives to piggyback them on at the end of my residency. So I did basically a 14-month fellowship, because my last 2 rotations of mammo or of residency was breast. So that's just me, but that worked for me. You know what I mean? So I think that every senior resident has to be honest, and they might not know. If you don't know, then, kind of do a hybrid of that. But if you know that you want to do other things than mammo, then you might want to spend a little bit more time learning another trade and getting really good at another trade in radiology, so that you can kind of show up with another tool in your toolbox.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so glad our panelists touched this different aspects of how to get yourself ready. You know, ultimately you want to set yourself ready for your future jobs. So depending on your goal, and also, you know, as everyone said, you want to you don't want to play catch ups throughout your fellowship, but you also want to you know, have a long-term goal to get yourself there as well. So we all did the breast imaging fellowship, and so what do you think are the important things a fellow should achieve during their fellowship year? Because a year actually goes by really fast.
You want to become an expert. I mean, fellowship year, that's the year. You know, if you leave fellowship year and, you know, you think that you can't handle something in breast imaging, then you wasted a fellowship year. You know, obviously everyone's going to make mistakes. Everyone's going to miss things. Everyone's going to, you know, encounter a difficult case where, you know, you don't want to become too pompous where you can't lean on someone, and become too confident where you can't ask questions. I mean, Elisa will tell you, I call her my second brain. We're texting each other all the time, and you know, bouncing ideas off each other. So it's I'm not advising, you know, to shut the door on that, but at the same time, you want to come out of fellowship comfortable with all aspects of breast imaging. Comfortable, yeah, I can do that biopsy. Yeah, I can, you know, do that diagnostic workup. Yeah, I can, you know, localize that thing that other people don't think that maybe they could localize. You want to be able to get good at doing that stuff, and have the procedures come second nature to you, because if you get really good at doing the mundane procedures, then the complicated procedures aren't as complicated.
I tried to ask all of my attendings all of the possible things that could go wrong in a procedure. I tried to prepare myself. I was like, okay, you know, if I can figure out all the complications, then I don't have to experience it on my own. Well, it turns out that never works, obviously, but it is helpful to try and, you know, like you have to get the just bread and butter down. You just have to, and then you know, you can ask about the complicated things. You focus on the complicated things in fellowship and what you do to fix them, and that's my favorite part about the job, is not that everything is the same all of the time. It's actually when something is wrong and trying to figure out what to do to troubleshoot to fix it, because it's always something different, and it may be just something that, you know, I come up with things on the spot and just think, okay, well, you know, what makes sense, that kind of stuff. So I think yeah, like Matt said, you have to get that bread and butter, just the procedures down so that you can focus on the difficult things, and see how your attendings handle them too. I think one of the most important things to take out of it, these difficult situations, also is learn how to keep your cool and just make sure that, you know what, this happens and it's okay, and you have to accept it. This isn't a perfect world. It's not a perfect job. And you know, actually my dad told me, he's like, everyone in the room will feed off of your energy. So if you're freaking out, everyone else will freak out too. So you have to be calm, and then it's okay. And you know, and that's why I like breasts too. It's really okay. It's bad if something goes wrong, but is it really that bad? It's not that bad. You can fix it. So I think that's a big deal. A big part of something I took out of my fellowship also was shadowing breast surgeons for a period of time. I spent some time with one of our breast surgeons in her clinic, in the operating room, and it's fantastic. I wish I had actually done it even more, because it's such a great learning tool. It really helps bring things together. You see, because we're working so closely with them, and you understand what's coming to you, how to set them up for success, how they view things, and how it may be different than we're viewing things. And I think it only makes you become a better breast imager. I didn't get to the pathology side. I had a hard time trying to get, just it's a mental roadblock, but I think that spending time with pathology would have been really great. I should have done that. And then one last thing, I think at the end of my fellowship too, one of my mentors, Dr. Gazinski, she was just excellent. And it towards the end of the fellowship, it must have been like April or May or something, she would just let you go. Kind of like on a diag day, she would just say, go. She's like, I'm in the room over there. If you need help, you ask me. But she's like, it's up to you. You make the calls. And, she would, of course, review things later. She's like, worst comes to worst, we'll call the patient back. But she really just lets you make decisions, what you wanted to do, what pictures you wanted to take, the call at the end of the day, and just being that person on your own with a safety net, but really that she wasn't there telling me anything. I mean, there's a wall. So it was very helpful. So I think if you have an attending in your fellowship that will let you do that, it's fantastic. So
That's awesome.
yeah, really good stuff to take into to make that leap. I think then in the next few months to actually doing it on your own, which is frightening but pretty amazing at the same time.
So what about
Anyone
you?
else? Anything?
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say all through this point. And I think that's good because it means that it's, universal advice. And even into being an attending, continuing lifelong learning, I spend a lot of time talking to pathologists, oncologists, surgeons, and I feel like that is a great way to keep fresh, especially as things are changing. If they have a new paper coming out at their next meeting, I like to talk to them about it and if things are changing for them, like how they're approaching radial scars, but they're not necessarily changing for us, coming together and learning together, I think is really important. And I think the first point that you talked about, having that confidence and that calm for your patients and for everyone else in the room, part of that comes from having that experience of making the call. And so those two things go hand in hand. And, so much of radiology is just about anatomy and then differential. And breast imaging is different because the anatomy is not that complex, but it's about problem solving and knowing that no matter what happens, you're going to have an approach to it. And so I think just feeling confident in yourself and your ability to solve anything. I mean, I've been in practice nearly a decade and I still get stumped on occasion, and I'll have something that I'm like, okay, that's new. I've never seen that before. How am I going to do it? But if you go back to the basics and you go back to this is what I do when, you can keep that calm and handle it.
Yeah, that's all awesome. I love everyone. Like just basically touched upon all the key things we have to, learn and do as a fellow. I also feel like, different attendings have different approach. It's really helpful to be a fellow because you can work with so many different excellent people and learn from different experts. They all handle things differently, so you can come up with your own approach. And I feel like especially for biopsies and for diagnostic workup, there are certain things certain attending do that you like, and just make it your own and then try that in your own practice and come up with your own style. So I think that's the beauty about the fellowship. You get to all those like teaching from different people. And also I think as we already said, BIRAS, we touched upon that during for the residents, and it's also important for the fellows, important for us now too. So I think just that keep reading your BIRAS, practice based on the BIRAS, and when you become an expert, experts can top BIRAS sometimes, right? But as a fellow, we still wants to have our guidance, has the basics down, and talking about reading. So what books would you recommend people to read, at the different stages of their career, resident, fellow, attending, how do you usually read?
So, I mean, we touched on the BIRADS manual. I tell first day, first rotations, get used to looking at BIRADS. And then, there's a plethora of books that I could turn my computer to the bookshelf over there. And I've at least looked at each one of them. I've read a few all the way through, but most of them I've, just kind of referenced, there's, I was told back when I was a resident that the book from Copans, Breast Imaging from Copans, was something, and I read that front to back when I was a fellow. And it's a little outdated now. I think the copyright is 2012 on it. But that was helpful, and it helped me learn other things, not just for breast imaging, but it has a whole chapter on legal stuff, which we don't like to talk about, but it's something important to know. And there's other references of the Berg book that everyone I use that since I've become an attending. The Berg book that they call is my go-to is for like problem solving.
Yeah, you don't read that back to front to back every night.
No, no, impossible.
That like 5,000 page book. It's a great reference book, though. It has everything you could possibly need, which is I'll see things randomly like and come up in pathology, and I'm like, I don't know.
We're radiologists.
Yeah, and then you won't pop that
important.
baby open. Yeah, you just can't. I even tried to read it front to back. Like for my certifying exam, I was like, I'm gonna read this whole thing. I think I made it like not even 1,000 pages. I think I made it to like maybe 600, something like that, which I feel like was pretty impressive. But that's definitely a good reference book. When I really first started out, I actually liked Radiology Assistant to do like basic stuff. Just clicking on the breast tab there, I think, is a pretty good overview of things. I did use Crack the Core, even it does have some good tidbits in it. The problem is
he hates breast images.
You have to take it with a grain of salt. So, but also I think, and then currently I think SBI articles are always great. Any new article that you can find is great, particularly now that the SBI has all their own stuff that comes out. That's going to be super relevant. So I try to.
JBI has been a game changer. I wish I would have had that during residency, right? I mean, it came out when we were like senior residents or fellows or whatnot, and like it's like I get that every month, and it's something. Great. Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah.
One of the things that I do that, especially now, that I have all those reference books, but they're at my house, and I very rarely actually go over and pick one up and dust it off. But what I do use a lot is any article that I think is really pertinent, or that I know I'm going to like reference a lot because I'm going to get calls all the time. Or if I want to like send it, if I get an email from a family med doc, I can just send them the direct article. So I keep a kind of bank of my like must hit journal articles, or the ones I always look up. I have them in two places. One is just like in my email folder, and then I also have it in Google Docs. I keep those. And so those are something I can reach anywhere. If I'm on vacation and I think of something and I want to look it up, it's there. If I'm at the reading room, if I'm at home, I always have access. And then you get, kind of up-to-date information as well. Because, even though these books are amazing and they're great and they're definitely worthwhile, they're huge and they can become outdated. And having kind of the latest and greatest at your fingertips is super helpful when you're, in the reading room.
So Rachel, how did you pick up those articles?
It depends. I have little things that kind of pop up in my email. I always look at Journal of Breast Imaging, and I just all the major journals. I just kind of go down to breast. I look and see if there's anything new there, and I also try to kind of keep tabs every once in a while on the breast surgery articles, the oncology articles. I try to sweep those in as well, and just have my own little library of sorts.
That's awesome.
It's hard to keep on track. I know there are good ones out there I'm missing, but it's nice to kind of have the favorites at my fingertips.
That's awesome.
You can always ask too, and sometimes like our tumor boards will email them out sometimes because they do. So for all their different specialties, they'll email stuff out that they want their fellow to talk about. So those are usually pretty useful. But yeah, there's always new stuff coming out. It's just you have to keep up. You have to keep reading the articles, because breast is fast paced,
Books
fast
get outdated and people
changing.
get outdated too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think like doing tumor board is a way of learning too, right? Because
Yeah.
they'll bring up all those new evidence and things like that, and that also comes with like if you are able to do elective in breast surgery, oncology, radiation oncology, or pathology, then it's actually really helpful because then what are the basic questions the clinician actually are interested in knowing. So it helps with how you present, how you do your report and how you present the cases in tumor board. It ultimately helps you to become a better breast imager, to be more helpful to the patients and to the clinicians. So I think those are, and also I think one thing like I also want to briefly say, as a fellow, you have a happy days and also the days that you're not that happy, like if you're not doing something wrong, got kicked out of a procedure or things like that. So I think just don't take anything personal, and because ultimately different attendings have different preference, and different attending have different strengths. Some people may be really good at teaching procedure. Some people may be really good at teaching you breast MRI. Some people may be really good at teaching you diagnostics. So whoever you work with that day, just to make the most out of that day, it will all adds up. And I feel like even if you feel like you are a little bit short, uh, your experience is not the best you want to be in certain perspectives, it will all catch up very quickly once you become a junior attending, because once you got put on the spot, you just you just learn, you just like fly on the spot. I want to get everyone's perspective. So what would your advice be for people who just came out of fellowship? I think right now, it's July, lots of people just graduated, starting their new job. What would so what do you how do you think they can um, be succeed in their first job?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's tough and it's scary, and you have to just get through the hurdle. Starting anything new is difficult, but this is kind of great because this is going to be something that you're doing for the rest of your life, and you get to do something you actually really love. Like, this is amazing. I don't have to do neuroimaging anymore. This is just great. So that's the good part. But it's scary, making decisions on your own and knowing that somebody is not looking over your shoulder, but also making sure that you can rely on your colleagues. Like, I mean, Matt and I still talk to each other all the time, but it's definitely gotten less frequent over the years. Unfortunately, we don't have as many questions for each other, but having someone there that you don't feel badly that you're asking them a question. So, because you want to feel confident about, at the end of the day, even if they're just saying back the same thing to you that you're already thinking, which probably is the case, just having someone, being on that same wavelength, reassuring you that, that's okay, just, giving them a short call. Everyone's always happy to just be like, oh, yeah, sure, I'll drop what I'm doing. Let me take a look. Like, it's never a big deal. And I tried to go out of my way to really to get to know the surgeons that I was going to work with. I think it was really important to build a relationship with them, because you're an important part of their day to day. I wanted to make sure that they knew they could trust me and that they could, go over cases with me and come in and ask me anything. So I felt like I wanted to be extra open with them, go out of my way to create a relationship, talk to them, tell them who I am, give me feedback, anything. But that was something that I tried to spend time on. So it's tough. It's definitely going to be tough, but it gets easy. It's like you said, it's like you just fly all of a sudden. You don't think you can, but then you do. And then it's pretty amazing making your own decisions. And sometimes maybe they're not the best decision, but it's okay because we are all going to make mistakes in the future, and that's just the way that it works, and kind of accepting that. But it's fun, I think, starting out. So those are the things that I kind of try to do. I think people should try, at least.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Sure.
Ladies first. I try to hold back.
So I would echo all that, especially if you're in a smaller group where maybe you don't have as much access to other radiologists or other, fellowship trained radiologists. I think finding that community in other places is important. And so, I was the only breast imager in my first job. That was a big change. But I, really relied on my surgeons, my pathologists, the pathologist I had, she's one of my good girlfriends now. Make those connections with your other clinical partners. Trust your techs, especially if you have a senior tech. Sometimes they can kind of say, hey, I'm getting this from the patient. I get this feeling. That can be helpful. So trust your techs, trust your intuition above all. If you're going back and forth on something, there's a reason you are, and trust your gut. Whenever I've gone with my gut instinct, it's never been wrong to do that. So trust in yourself and go out of your way to find those people. And there are things that if I was kind of mulling over something, even though you have to make the call right then and there, but I might text a friend who's a breast imager somewhere else and just be like, hey, what do you think about this? So even if you don't have somebody sitting right there across the hall from you, you can still build a community even when you're in a small private setting. Yeah.
I'll mention the sine wave of confidence, and I don't know what the bottom was called, but I experienced the sine wave greatly when I started. So the sine, if you don't know the sine wave, I guess I should go this way, right? The way my computer screen is. So when you start out, you make a few great calls and you get really confident, then something goes bad and your confidence dips. And then you start making more good calls, you make more good calls, and something goes bad and your confidence dips. And so that's going to happen, especially your first year. What you want is the sine wave to kind of be like this. So your first year, it's going to go like this, and then you want to level it out. And so that's, I don't know. I experienced that. I definitely experienced that. I've been humbled more than I'd probably like to admit, but it makes you a better imager. It makes you a better breast imager. It makes you better for your patients. And, that's you can't be afraid of it. You can't be afraid to embrace your mistakes and recognize them and learn from them, because they're going to happen. They're going to be happening more frequently. They will never stop. It will never be an end of zero mistakes, but you want to, the more you learn from your mistakes, the less they will occur. And so, acknowledge that when you start out, that, you're new, you have all this knowledge, you have all this enthusiasm. It might be a little scary. You're going to make some good calls. Try not to get as high, and try to recognize, be humble as far as, one bad call can knock you down, and recognize that. And the bottom's never truly as bad as it is, and the top's never truly as good as it is. You want to stay kind of even keel.
Yeah, that peer review, that'll knock you right back.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's I remember in fellowship attendings telling me, breast is a very humbling job, in all sorts of ways. So it's great, but it will be forever humbling. So it takes a second, I think, to really learn that, but still a great job overall.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's great suggestions for the new people. Just start to be on their own for the first time. So I actually really like the fact that Rachel was the only breast imager, because then you can follow up all your pathology and everything. I try to do that, but it's not always easy, because we don't necessarily have a good system. You kind of have to, and it takes time, and you have a lot of work to do every single day. I wonder, have you guys been tracking your own pathology, and how do you feel like that helps?
I do. I found a way on, if anyone has Epic, there's a way on Epic. It's called there's an MQSA tab in Epic, at least in our Epic. I assume it's global, but I was able to tweak my settings and everything, so I see what happens to all my callbacks. I have a callbacks list that I just kind of keep a running tab on, and I don't go through every single callback.
It'll give you the MR of your callback.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
Oh yeah. I haven't showed you that. Oh yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. It'll show me everything I gave a 0, and then what's happened to each one of them. How many of them are, 1s and 2s versus 3s versus 4s and 5s. And you can click on it and be like, oh, all right, that was a good call. Or, oh, okay, yeah. Yeah,
What was I thinking?
yeah. I don't know what that callback was, but yeah. It's wonderful. It's been a great learning tool. And I just was toying around with Epic one day and I found that. And it's actually, I talked to one of the techs who prints up our numbers every 6 months, and that's how she prints up our numbers, is using that. I'll show it to you, Lisa.
Yeah, I mean, I know you get the percentage. Like I've looked for the percentages.
If you click on the BIRAD 0 thing, it'll pull up all the patients.
Oh, wow. This is amazing. See, you still learn new things every
Look at
day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yes, I at least try to track all the ones that of my callbacks that get biopsied and see what they come back as.
Yeah, so you automatically got that, Rachel. Like as being
I didn't
one
actually.
person.
So we had generalists rotating in, so I didn't automatically get that. I got a lot of it, but not necessarily. So if you never know what you're going to get. Maybe you have Epic, maybe you don't. Maybe there's some clunkier systems out there that are a little bit harder with reporting. But if there's something that you're going through the screening queue and you're just like, oh, I don't know about that, write down the MRI or the MR and check it yourself a couple days down the road. So you can kind of get around that. Of course, the ones you learn the most from are usually the ones that kind of creep up out of nowhere. So it just kind of depends on how much time you want to put into it. But most systems, you should be able to run a report of your BIRAD zeros if it doesn't do it for you automatically. And then you can just go back through them and look. I know for some PQI projects and stuff, I've gone through all of our 4s and 5s and looked at them, and it's time consuming, but you do learn a lot.
Yes, that's great. So what conferences would you recommend people to go for learning and for networking in breast imaging?
Obviously SBI, right? We're supposed to say the logo down there. Any conference, every conference you go to, AUR, Rankin Ray, RSNA, they all, as long as they're a general conference. I mean, you're not going to learn much breast imaging at the SIR meeting, but yeah, I mean, I've been to AUR, RSNA, ACRs. They all have some flavor of breast imaging, so you're going to learn stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we want to do a shout out for the Society of Breast Imaging. I feel like they have been doing a great job supporting us with all kinds of learning opportunities, conferences, webinars, and so definitely very good for networking, because all the breast imagers, regardless they are private practice or academics, always like to go to SBI and to learn the newest. And right now, last meeting, people talked about the newer version of BIRADS, which is really relevant to our day-to-day practice. So last but not least, what would be our take-home message for our audience today?
Ladies first.
Take-home message. Okay, so I guess there's something on training, and I think a big point for me is really to just try your best to get as involved and as hands-on as you possibly can. Even if you don't think you're going into breast imaging, it will help you no matter what. And showing your hard work and dedication is so important. It just really goes far. People remember that kind of thing. And so I think that that's probably, what I'd have to say. And don't be afraid to ask questions to other people. That's what we're all here for. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. And then don't freak out also. Be calm.
I think for me, the theme that has kind of been throughout my radiology career is that learning is a team sport. I have learned best from my peers. Whether that's in residency or, as an attending, reaching out to other people. So, don't be afraid to ask those questions and to try to find somebody else that you can connect with if there's something that's bothering you, or, if you're in training, it really will go so much better and it'll be more fun. Some of my best memories from residency are when we were studying. We used to do all sorts of fun stuff while we were studying. So find those people who you feel like you can ask questions of and actually use them.
I'll give a a cliche, I guess you could call it, but it doesn't take much to give 100%, right? So when you come in and you're trying to learn how to be a breast imager, or you're trying to perfect your methods of being a breast imager, or you're trying to continue to be as good of a breast imager as you possibly can be, giving effort 110% every day is going to make a difference. When you come in and you just kind of go through the motions, okay, I'll do that biopsy, okay, I'll read a couple mammograms, and you're just trying to get to 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, then you're not going to be good for your patients. You're not going to be good for yourself. You're going to hate your job, and you're going to burn out. But if you come in every day wanting to put your best foot forward and excited to do what you do as a breast imager, and looking to learn from your mistakes, looking to learn from your successes, looking to help out each other, and consult other people, have that energy. Like Elisa said, everyone's going to feed off of your energy. If you have that positive energy, you don't have to be the brightest person in the room. You can just, it's going to come to you, because, effort is key in breast imaging and in all of radiology, in my opinion.
In life.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love all of that. And I feel like exactly like everyone said, just to work hard, and lots of the learning come from practice, come from your day to day, and know your barriers, and read some reference books.
Huge.
Keep up with the
Keep the barriers.
Keep up with the newest, and make sure you read the articles, go to conferences, not just for the CME, but really to help yourself to be a good breast imager. And as you all mentioned, spend time to build relationships, helpful to your colleagues and to the clinicians, to your patients. So I'm so glad to have such a wonderful panel tonight. I hope I learned a lot from you all, and I hope all of our audience also learned something, from this discussion. So we hope to see you all next week.
Well, we had a wonderful moderator. We had a wonderful moderator. I think they pressed the button too quick, but we had a wonderful moderator. Thank you, Jill. And thank you to Elisa for filling in quickly. And thank you, Rachel, for being awesome. Thank you guys, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.